Author's note. I started making this story a while ago when it was like the first or second season. It's different than some parts of the show. Like, I didn't know the vegetables backstory until I already wrote it and then they released the episode. If there was information from the show that came out that I could include into the story, I could. But yeah, so like it's not exactly one-to-one with the show. But I tried to pack as much of it as I could. Chapter 3. A Productive Detour. It could be considered the middle of nowhere, as far as maps were concerned. Inkling was many, many miles from the coast of South America, not really known by the creatures on land nor in the scientific field. Yet the octopus knew it was many creatures' homes, so the area he was in was still significant. Schools of fish scurried everywhere, and corals were steadfast in the sand, towering several feet high. Crabs scurried. Inkling saw two fighting over a strand of decaying seaweed, each pulling the piece in opposite directions. Inkling was observing the scene around him, but he was just passing through. He was heading towards the mainland, and he expected to arrive before sundown. He had it all planned out. Once he arrived at a nearby port, he would check in at a hotel, then spend a few weeks in the neighboring towns, searching for the right creatures to join what he was after. It would take a while before he found the perfect members, but he was not really nervous. He had a notion that they were out there somewhere, just waiting to be found. And he had the whole world to look through. As he was moving along, something caught his eye. Among the coral, he would usually find holes or tunnels inside them. Small fish would swim in and out of there, and eels especially liked to make them their homes. However, the fish that was before him was much too large, and it had gotten stuck in a hole. All Inkling saw was its blue tail, thrashing wildly as it tried to get out. Yet no matter how hard it tried, the poor thing didn't budge. Not wanting to leave the fish alone, Inkling swam up to it, stopping on the right side of it. "Hello," Inkling called to the fish. Its tail instantly straightened, tense by the sudden appearance of an unknown creature. Seeing the sudden tension, Inkling hurried on. "Don't worry, I don't want to hurt you. My name's Professor Inkling, and I couldn't help but see that you are in a predicament. Is it alright if I help you?" He wanted to gain the fish's trust because it couldn't see him, and if he automatically started helping, the fish would assume he was trying to attack it. Inkling didn't need the situation to get any messier than it was. The fish said something, but the voice was muffled. All he could hear was gibberish. The tail slackened, however, indicating that the fish accepted his words. "Alright, I'm gonna pull you out," Inkling said, wrapping four of his arms around the fish. He placed his other arms against the coral as support. "I'll pull on the count of 3, the professor said. 1, 2, 3. He pulled as hard as he could without hurting the fish. It started to slightly slide out of the hole, showing a bit of oddly yellow skin, but Inkling didn't see it. Stopping for a second, Inkling took a deep breath and pulled again, straining in the effort. Then suddenly, with a plop, Inkling found himself flipping backwards by the momentum of the fish's burst of freedom. But he soon righted himself and looked at the fish. He had not expected what he saw. The creature he freed was not a fish at all. True, it had the body of one, but its head. He didn't know why, but it reminded Inkling of a vegetable. A turnip, to be exact. Maybe it was the yellow skin, or the green leaf-looking appendages sprouting from the top of his head. He wondered what this creature was. But then he suddenly realized he was staring and immediately looked away. The creature, however, didn't seem to notice. He had an amiable face, looking at the professor in a friendly manner. He came towards the professor slightly and started talking in a language he had never heard before. Inkling overcame his initial shock and looked at the creature more closely. He had never heard the scientific community talk about a creature like this. His mouth upturned slightly, barely showing a swell of excitement starting to rise. Did he just discover a new species? Quieting his swirling and increasingly excited thoughts, he said, "I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand you." He expected the creature to stop talking when he wouldn't understand Inkling's words, but he gave a knowledgeable "oh" in his high-pitched voice, along with a comprehending nod. "Wait, do you know what I'm saying?" Inkling asked. The creature nodded again. "If you do, spin around once." The small animal did so, doing a quick yet graceful spin. "Amazing," Inkling said. "Can you speak it?" The creature tried, but for some reason he couldn't. It was hard for him to form English words, leaving him only to make guttural noises and stutters. "I've never seen this before," Inkling thought contemplatively. To be able to understand yet not speak. As far as he could tell, no other types of animals were like this. "That's all right," the professor said, trying to calm him. The creature had started to look frustrated. His brow was furrowed, trying to concentrate while his words kept failing to come out. Inkling changed the subject. "Say, do you live alone, or are you part of a group, like a herd or a school?" He was genuinely curious, and he couldn't help but let the excitement of scientific discovery take over. The creature immediately perked up at the question. "Pito ni Citra," he said, gesturing Inkling to follow him. He didn't know what exactly he said, but he guessed it was a yes and that he wanted the professor to meet them. He complied, and they went northeast, exactly the opposite direction Inkling was intending to go. Although he felt a little anxious that his search was put on hold, he knew how important this was to the scientific world. If he left now, who knew when this creature, this Vegemal, he thought the name up on the spot, would be found again. This may have slowed down his search for his crew, but this excursion was still valuable. A productive detour, he mused. Besides, he was enjoying the creature's company. As they swam among the coral, Inkling asked him questions, learning more about him and his species. They were yes or no questions, so the Vegemal only had to nod or shake his head. "Do you come here often?" was one of Inkling's questions. His new companion nodded and glanced at him a bit curiously. Looking forward again, he held up something with his front flippers. It was several strips of kelp. He was carrying it the whole time, but only now did Inkling notice, much to his embarrassment. The yellow creature was hiding it, but he looked inquisitively at the professor as he said, "Oh, I see. You were foraging for food. I'm assuming that's why you were in the hole in the first place. You were trying to gather it, but you became stuck in the process." The Vegemal gave a hard nod with a trill of affirmation, then said something more. How Inkling wished he could understand him. "I'm sorry, I didn't get that." The Vegemal thought a bit, then putting most of the seaweed in one flipper, he took one and held it with both flippers, stretching it out. He then proceeded to make the seaweed spin or curl in the water, making it spiral. In his pantomime, he looked like he was wrapping the seaweed around something. Inkling still didn't understand it. "Do you wrap it around other foods?" he asked. The Vegetable shook his head, thinking again. But having no other way to explain it, he held up a flipper. "Wait." He then pointed in the direction they were heading. "You'll see when we get to our destination." It was Inkling's turn to nod, and there was a lull in conversation as they continued on silently. The Vegemal would glance at the professor every now and then, still with that questioning look on his face. But after a while, he finally asked what was on his mind. "Chito bri?" he said, stopping and pointing at him. "What?" Inkling asked. Without really realizing it, he made a subconscious note that the Vegemal rolled his R's. The Vegemal pointed with bigger emphasis at the round piece of glass in front of Inkling's eye. "Chito bri?" he asked again. He seemed confused at what it was. "Oh, you're asking about this?" the professor said. He took off the optical instrument. "This is a monocle." He handed it to the creature. The Vegemal took it, studying the clear object carefully. After a couple moments, he put it on one of his own eyes. Letting it go, the monocle stayed on his face, and he stared, blinking. It made one of his eyes feel strange and see differently. He moved his head, seeing how everything around him was somewhat blurry. "Charato," he said in amazement, his mouth forming an O at the word's last syllable. His wide eyes and look of wonder made Inkling chuckle. "This little device helps me see better," the professor explained. "You see, without them, one of my eyes sees everything slightly fuzzy, probably how my monocle is doing that to you now. But that is because it is meant only for my eye. Your vision is perfect and doesn't need it." The Vegemal nodded, absorbing the information. After a moment, the creature returned the optical instrument, and they started swimming again. "By the way, I've never caught your name," Inkling said. "Tunip," he replied with a smile. Inkling found the name quite fitting. After a few more miles, the ground started to rise past the water surface. An island, Inkling soon realized. They went towards it, soon feeling the motion of the waves hitting the beach. They were pleasantly pushed forward by the water, which helped get them closer, but then they had to fight the even stronger pull of the wave as it went back out to sea. Eventually, once they were close enough, Tunip was able to stand. He started to waddle out of the water, and Inkling followed, ignoring the light chill the air brought on his wet skin. "So, they can breathe both below and above water," he thought. That slight smile returned again, but it was a bit softer than before. He didn't know why, but small characteristics like these gave him an amusement, fascination, and, strangely, warmth unlike anything else. It was a fairly small island, with a wide beach of white sand. The beach transitioned to an area of palm trees, immediately springing up past an invisible point on the land. Among these palm trees were small huts, with walls of sticks and wood, and roofs thatched with palm fronds. A few pillars of light smoke rose from behind one of the buildings. They must have been cooking something. Inkling looked at the beautiful scene before him. "This island looks picturesque," he complimented. "Yeah," Tunip agreed. At least Inkling could understand that. Suddenly, they started to hear other high-pitched voices. They saw a group of creatures similar to Tunip appear from behind the buildings. Their looks again surprised Inkling. They had different colored heads, from red to blue to purple, and while most of them had blue fish bodies, some of them were green. There were about 20 of them, all in different sizes, but most, if not all of them, were shorter than Inkling. The professor then thought of something. "Will everyone else understand English?" he asked quietly to Tunip. He glanced up at the octopus and nodded, before they both looked back at the other Vegemals. They were excited over Tunip's arrival, running towards him and happily chirping. But then they noticed Inkling, and their demeanors changed. They slowed down in front of them and slowed their speech until there was only silence. They all grouped together, forming a sort of half circle in front of Inkling and Tunip, and they all stared at Inkling. The professor started to feel awkward with their eyes on him, but then it got to, what he thought, the worst state imaginable. They started talking amongst themselves. Among them, Inkling particularly noticed a red-headed Vegemal, smaller than Tunip, leaning towards a blue-headed one and whispering a bit uneasily to him, pointing at Inkling. The professor smiled towards them all, trying to look as friendly as possible, although his uncomfortableness made it look strained. It was clear that they didn't see many visitors. Tunip began talking to them, a somewhat long dialogue. At first, Inkling wasn't entirely sure what it was about. He guessed it was something about him, but when Tunip did a motion that looked like he was pulling something, the professor understood that he was talking about how Inkling freed him from the hole he was stuck in. As he finished, the Vegetables all looked at Inkling with more trusted, happy looks. Then another Vegemal, a blue one, spoke to the others in a loud voice. Pito charipi, si prelo na mieto ni partor di sorsila. They all crowded around Inkling and gently started pulling them toward their dwellings. He was surprised at their changes of mood, to say the least. Where are we going? He asked. An orange one answered him cheerfully, but the poor professor still didn't know. They went past the first couple huts. Inkling looked to the side and was surprised to find a Vegemal, he was guessing a female, looking out from the doorway. A little Vegemal, a child, peeked from behind her. It waved at Inkling, smiling shyly. He returned the smile and waved back before a noise got him looking forward again. The huts formed a circle with a space wide enough to be a sort of plaza or square. Within it were 4 fires, rather large, with each looked after by 2 Vegemals. A few of the Vegemals in his group were called out to them. Tunip walked up to another yellow Vegemal, who was taking care of a fire, and handed them the seaweed. The new yellow Vegemal came back towards the fire and picked up a stick from a pile of them laying on some palm leaves. He started wrapping the seaweed around them and putting those sticks on 2 wooden holders, one on each side of the fire, so that the seaweed was being cooked over it. So that was what Tunip's pantomime was about, Inkling thought, recalling earlier. They were cooking seaweed on a stick. He looked at the 2 other fires and saw that more food was being prepared. At one, a Vegemal was using a long, seemingly light rock as a sort of pan, frying something on it. At another one, a large pot was boiling. The last one was interesting. Inkling noticed that the fire was significantly smaller, not the fireplace, but the fire itself. It had been reduced to terrifically hot, glowing pieces of wood. He grew curious as a couple Vegemals put what looked like a large box with an empty space for its floor over the fire, so the 4 sides were completely encircling it. A large purple Vegemal came towards the box, holding a tray that held dough cut in pieces that were shaped like fish. He opened a small door on one side of the box, revealing a crisscross of stones, beautifully carved, and secured tightly to the sides of the box. There were enough long, thin stones to hold the tray of food up, yet there were enough spaces to allow the fire's heat in. Inkling gasped in surprise and awe. It was a makeshift oven. Inkling was led to a stump of a palm tree that had been cut down a couple years ago, and he was encouraged to sit on it. Most of the Vegemals sat on the ground around him, but a few ran off, soon bringing back wooden plates, bowls, and utensils. In a couple minutes, the food was ready. Everything else had been cooking for a while, and barbecuing seaweed took no time at all. So began the first of many meals with the Vegemals. The starting dish was the soup from the large pot, one with a bright red broth. It had predominantly a sea sort of smell and taste. Inkling believed there was red seaweed in it, a different species than what Tunip had gathered. Yet, at the same time, did he detect a small hint of beets? Were they even grown in a tropical climate? For the life of him, Inkling wasn't sure. But it was delicious all the same, a blend of the coast and the mainland. Just as Inkling and the others finished their soup, the next food came. Dish after dish they brought him, foreign yet having a strange familiarity. Seaweed on sticks, salads with tropical fruits in them, fish biscuits. There was no fish in it, and it tasted more like a blend of crackers and biscuits. The name came from its shape. And a number of other delectables. He ate his full, trying each and every dish. Everything was so delicious. And all of these creatures, these Vegemals, as he had come to call them, were all kind. He had noticed the significance of where he was, being the only one to sit on an actual seat while they were on the sand. And whenever a Vegemal would hand him a new plate with the next dish, they would always have the most welcoming smiles. He couldn't thank the inhabitants enough for their hospitality, and for allowing him into their home. They chirped happily in response. Line break. Inkling stayed for the next couple days, observing everything and looking at the Vegemal's way of life. Their daily life was very structured. The Vegemals would separate into groups and go about their chores, growing food, collecting ingredients from the ocean, watching the children, and building huts when needed. The professor was fortunate to come while they were in that process, and he was able to observe it one afternoon. Each group would also alternate in their roles. For example, the group that cooked the dinner the first night would collect food the next day. Tunip's solitary trip to the ocean was abnormal in this case, since no one accompanied him. Inkling found out months later, when the language barrier had grown smaller, that, although Tunip's group had collected food earlier that day, there was still not enough seaweed. The yellow Vegemal had offered to take a quick trip, and everything had gone from there. Inkling spent most of his time with Tunip's group, consisting of the yellow animal and 7 other male Vegemals, a rather entertaining bunch. It soon became clear that they were a close group of friends, for they spent time together even when their chores were finished. They showed Inkling around, introducing him to their parents and siblings. Tunip and his friends were all single, pointing out their favorite spots on the island, showing the various jobs the inhabitants had, and their favorite routes when collecting food. Inkling liked watching Tunip's group when they worked, especially when they cooked. They had to make lunch on the second day of Inkling's stay. They worked well together, rarely ever getting in each other's way. When they really went into the rhythm of the task, letting their cheer rise up and their flippers do the work themselves, they would sing a little tune. It was catchy, and added a sort of cute charm to their small selves. There was a charisma in all the Vegemals in general, by the way that they smiled, worked hard yet cheerfully, and valued each other. It was something that made Inkling pause, as if he had rarely seen anything like it. He had, but it was never this pure. He especially enjoyed the meals, for food was a huge part of their culture. A large part of their lives were dedicated to growing and providing it, but more importantly, meals were a social event. It was where everyone separated from their groups and activities and all joined together. It was heartwarming to see them happily chatting to each other, sometimes laughing at someone's joke, or being silent when one of the older ones would tell a tale. Although he never understood anything, it became one of his favorite times, not only because it was insanely interesting to study their behavior, but their closeness and family bond was tangible. At the second dinner, Inkling changed from being an observer to joining the conversation. He put in a few stories of his own, describing where he came from and some of the research he had done when he was part of the British University. "One time," Inkling said, "I traveled with a couple of my students to Antarctica, a place way south at the bottom of the earth. It is a cold place, with ice stretched out for miles. Brrr," he said in effect, shivering dramatically. He was starting to get into this. "I can almost feel the cold. But if you prepare enough for it, then it's manageable." I had set up a research project with my colleague and friend, Dr. Galen, who is a penguin. "A penguin," he explained, seeing their confused looks, "is a black and white bird that cannot fly, but is an amazingly capable swimmer. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, Dr. Galen is in charge of a major marine hospital in Antarctica. A few of his doctors joined us to study marine life, particularly orcas and beluga whales. Inkling also gently explained what these creatures were. He was never impatient with them. He understood that they never traveled far from the island, so he described whatever caused their confused looks. They were really expressive. "Both of our groups would take a boat and zoom out into the ocean," he sighed. "Oh, I remember that clearly. Going on a boat that fast made me very nervous at first. I held on to that deck for dear life the first 2 times, but afterwards I got used to it, and eventually came to enjoy feeling the wind whipping past us. Whenever we met a pod of the mammals we wanted to research, Dr. Galen's group did a checkup on them, using a thermometer, a device to check their temperature, among many other medical equipment. My group recorded their songs through a device called a hydrophone." The Vegemals murmured at this. To think, being able to catch sound. "And we also studied the relationships between the members of the herd and what each individual's role was." Inkling sighed again, going back to that time. Ah yes, everyone enjoyed themselves on that trip. Tunip and his friends absorbed everything he said. This foreign octopus seemed from another world almost. His descriptions of other places and glimpses of the tools that they used made them want to see the world. It all sounded so fun. By the end of the 5th day, Inkling walked on the beach on his tentacles, looking around at the beauty of the place. Tunip and his friends were nearby, messing around. They were wrestling each other in fun, making a dog pile. Inkling watched in amusement, hearing their laughter and energetic chatter. But then his smile went away, and he absentmindedly looked at the sunset. It was breathtaking, with the brilliant sun surrounded by orange light, slowly turning into blue as it came farther from its source. However, he couldn't help but feel that he had spent enough time on the island. He needed to continue his search. He had to leave. And so it was with a surprisingly heavy heart that he said goodbye the next morning to the Vegemals, all crowding around him. "I have to go," he said. I was traveling in this part of the world for a project I am doing. I would love to stay here longer, but it is important. The Vegemals nodded in understanding, but their heads lowered. They said their glum farewells. Goodbye, Inkling said. He forced himself to turn away, but he started to feel as if he was making a mistake. I hope we see each other soon. But then he stopped. Why can't they join me? He thought. It was a simple question, but it never even crossed his mind. Not when he was studying their culture or spending time with them. It especially did not come when he was planning to go. Now, however, a vision quickly formed in his mind. It struck him with surprising clarity and force, and a thrill went through him as he could see pieces forming together. Some of his crew may have been in front of him all along. He turned back towards the natives and told his thoughts. The reason I was out there in the first place, Inkling explained, was because I'm trying to bring a crew together. You see, I'm putting on a project that will... He explained what he planned, what the crew was for, and what they would do. The Vegemals listened to them in awe, staring at him with wide eyes. Tunip especially. Something sparked in those depths. I need some cooks who would prepare food for the ship, and a few hands that would aid the engineer in maintaining the machinery. She doesn't need scores of mechanics like she does now, but some support would be good. So, this was the time to ask, would any of you want to join? The tone changed in the air, and their expressions changed. There was a silence over the group. Tunip brought a flipper to his mouth, deep in thought. As the Vegemals kept considering, and the stillness grew longer, Inkling started to doubt if this was a good idea. But then Tunip stepped forward. His eyes were bright and clear, confident, and with a bit of adventure in its depths. He looked Inkling in the face and gave a little determined smile, and it was as if the octopus could hear his voice, loud and clear. I will come with you. His friends stepped beside him, a couple at a time. Some, like the small red Vegemal, were more nervous than the others, but they stood together, resolute and willing to leave what they have always known. Inkling nodded, growing a bit solemn at the exchange. They were putting their lives under his care. I thank you for making this decision, Inkling said to the 8. It's not an easy choice, but we have done it quickly and willingly. I hope together we will be helpful to other creatures in the sea. And here he smiled, and have fun doing it. And one day we would have amazing stories to tell when we come back and visit. At this the other Vegemals cheered, glad that they would not lose their relatives and friends forever. We'll leave tomorrow, Inkling said, changing his plans yet again. So let's enjoy another day here with those close to you. After his declaration, the Vegemals mingled, talking quickly and excitedly to the 8, the first travelers of their kind. As Inkling saw his new companions, laughing and speaking with everyone around them, he couldn't help but be in awe. It was actually happening. The crew was starting to come together.